The Descent 2 brings us another descent into the mountains, but it also brings us a very different type of descent as well, I'm afraid. Hi guys, so first of all, apologies, my videos may be a little bit sparse in the forthcoming period. I've just started a new job which involves a lot of travel and training, and my brain is mostly focused on that at the moment, but I'm going to try and get in front of the camera when I can. I did manage to watch The Descent 2 the other night. Now, I remember this film as being average but watchable, but I must have been watching it in a drunken haze, because that wasn't my experience this time. I found The Descent 2 this time to be extremely poor, mainly because of the story. There's just no story here. If this had been an original film about a bunch of mountain rescuers going down to try and get some potholers out of Dodge, and they come across some creatures, fine, I could have enjoyed it as some random one-off horror film. But because this is following on from one of the greatest horror films of all time, in my opinion, it's extremely unsatisfying. It makes the big mistake of trying to use characters from the first movie. I think the only way you could have done a Descent sequel, really, is to have a bunch of new characters coming along and discovering the cave somehow. But trying to force this film into being a part 2 with a continuation of those character arcs, it's just horrible, honestly. First of all, they've had to go with the American ending just to be able to do a sequel, which is not everybody's favourite ending. I think most people probably watch this with the downbeat British ending. So straight away we're on the back foot. I mean, personally, I don't mind the American ending that much, but it's what they do after establishing that we're using the American timeline that's the problem for me. So the main character from the first film, Sarah, the script gives her amnesia at the beginning of the second film before she can explain what happened down in the caves. I find this an extremely horrendous turn of events for this character. Has anybody ever met anybody who has developed amnesia in real life? Because I haven't. It's surely something which is very, very rare. And yet here we are in this movie. Sarah suddenly cannot remember everything. It's just a convenient excuse to get cops and mountain rescuers going down into the caves without knowing what they're up against. But the problem is that this turns Sarah into an absolute zombie for like most of this film. She's just walking along with a childlike blank expression on her face. Like, this was a really great character in the first movie. She had an interesting but tragic history, and she was just fascinating to follow. And that whole story of how she, you know, rose up at the end of the film and became this badass Ripley type character and got her revenge, and now she's just a blank-faced zombie character. It's not very appealing at all, you know. She also makes really weird character decisions. Like, some of her memories come back to her during this film, but when that happens, she lashes out at the mountain rescuers and the cops and runs off into the caves by herself, which is surely a death wish. If she was remembering the dangers of the caves, then surely she would do the opposite. She would gather everybody around and tell them what the danger is, and so they could all get back to the elevator sharpish. So it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We've also got the Juno character back, played by Natalie Mendoza, and this is equally poorly written as well. I watched the commentary track for the first Descent movie, and so there's one commentary track on that disc which features Neil Marshall and the entire cast, apart from Natalie Mendoza, supposedly because she was on some other acting gig at the time, so she couldn't turn up and do this commentary like everybody else. And Neil Marshall says, he says on the track, oh, it's a shame that she can't be here, but at least she's away doing other acting work. That's really positive, right? Well, I'm sure that was 6 months after the original film came out, but fast forward another 4 years to when The Descent 2 is being made, and suddenly Natalie Mendoza is free and able to come back and do this pathetic 20-minute reprisal of Juno. All she does in this time is look mean and wave her pickaxe around. There's no characterization or anything interesting happening in terms of the story. The relationship between Sarah and Juno this time around is just horribly handled. I mean, they basically just kiss and make up. But if you've seen the first film, this is just wholly unsatisfying, and there's nothing that happens throughout The Descent 2 that could justify Sarah suddenly treating Juno as if she's her best friend ever. It's just rancid script writing. It's like, why are you doing this Disney type ending where everything has to work out between these two characters? That's not what we want from this, surely. Am I alone on this? But the whole point of the first film, it was like a tragic drama about, you know, friends taking advantage of other friends, and it leads to one tragic situation after another, and then, you know, those two people can never be friends again. It's sad, but it's sort of a reflection of something that often will happen in real life between friends, except we're watching it in a cave exploring environment with monsters. But to suddenly retcon all that and have the same two characters suddenly become best buds for no other reason than they've had to survive 10 more minutes of crawlers, I just really don't like that. What makes this all worse is the final scene between the two at the end. So Juno becomes mortally wounded and lies down on the ground. Sarah goes and sits down with her and holds her hand, basically just to keep her company during her dying breaths, which go on for quite some time. But if she hadn't have done this and just escaped through the hole in the ceiling leading out to daylight, Sarah could have survived the movie. So she gives up her own life, in other words, just to spend an extra minute or two with Juno, her new best bud again. Why would you write it this way? It's such a poor way to kill off two really great characters. Granted, they weren't great in this film, but I really don't like how this is all done. And something that's even worse than that. So Juno has this necklace thing with the words "love every day" written on it, and Sarah managed to get hold of it at the end of the first movie, so she's still carrying it in this movie. So when it comes to Juno's death scene, Sarah gives it her back. She stuffs it into Juno's hand so that Juno can hold on to this precious memento during her dying breaths. But it's like, why on earth would Sarah do that? I mean, this is a necklace that was given to Juno from Sarah's husband using words that Sarah thought were only meant for her. She should hate this little trinket thing. She should want to cast it into the cracks of doom and have it, you know, covered in lava. She wouldn't give it back to Juno. It's just such a poor understanding of these characters and their history from the previous film. It's just too much of a stretch. Now, if Sarah had stood over Juno and mocked her as she was dying, that would have been something different. Although even in that case, that would still mean Sarah sacrificing her life by not going to the exit quick enough. So, but it still would have been better, you know, if she'd have, say, got the necklace and stuffed it into Juno's mouth and laughed at her. You know, it would have been a little bit like what was that Western? Once Upon a Time in the West with Harmonica Man, when he stuffs the harmonica into Henry Fonda's mouth. You know, really cool ending that. And if something like that had happened here, it would have been really cool. But as it is, it's just absolutely rubbish what they've gone for. Now, I personally wouldn't have done any sequel with these two characters. If I had, one way I might have done it is to have Sarah and Juno work together to get past the crawlers, and then maybe both of them would have made it out into the forests, and then you could have had some sting in the tail ending where maybe you think Sarah's going to kill Juno now, but then flip it and have Juno kill Sarah out of self-preservation because she anticipates that Sarah's going to kill her because of what happened at the end of the first movie. That might have been one way they could have made a sequel, but I still wouldn't have gone there. The other characters are extremely thin and underdeveloped. This is in complete contrast to the first movie. In the first Descent, we got to know all the girls extremely well. By the time anybody went into the caves, you know, we'd seen the girls interact with each other. We knew their backstories, we knew their histories and occupations. We'd had a chance to see them all interacting and having a laugh with each other. By the time the first rope goes down into those caves, we're just invested in these characters. But in the Descent 2, by the time everybody goes down into the mine system on the elevator, I don't know any of these people. To me, they're just a bunch of job titles. They're Mountain Rescue Worker 1, Mountain Rescue Worker 2, Mountain Rescue Worker 3, Cop 1, Cop 2, and Zombie Sarah. That's all they are to me at this point, because we just haven't had any characterization for any of them by the time that the Descent happens. The Mountain Rescue Workers turn out to be characters I kind of liked, and I would have liked to have got to know them a little bit better, but just as they were starting to really shine, they're then taken out of the movie. This story's got a really weird structure, because in the middle of it, we focus on the rescue workers a lot, actually, and this is when the best stuff in this movie happens. This is more of an action horror film, really, than a pure horror film. And there are some good little sequences sort of in the second act, some good setups. You know, there's an instance where one of the crawlers gets a boulder on its head and it squashes like a melon. I enjoyed that. And there's another good moment where the Australian woman rescue worker, she finds one of the bodies from the first movie and she uses it to swing across to the other side of this cavern. You know, some well thought out little action moments, most of them involving the rescue workers. And then suddenly they're taken out of the movie just when you think that these characters are being set up possibly as the new mains. It's like the scriptwriter was having fun with all this stuff and then suddenly remembered that he or she had a mandate to make this the Sarah and Juno show. So, you know, just in time for the last half an hour, we sort of switch back to those characters from the first movie. The cops are a lot worse than the rescue workers as characters, especially the main sheriff type guy, that fucking guy. What an arsehole. This guy is just utterly horrific, to the point where if he'd have been in the first movie, that first descent would not have been the masterpiece that it is today. He's that bad. He's a dickhead at the start of this film for no reason, and then he makes so many stupid decisions. Like, one of the rescue workers tells him, "Don't fire your gun in the caves. You'll bring the whole cave system down on our heads." 5 minutes later, what does he do? He fires his gun, and guess what? There's a cave in, and this separates the characters for pretty much the rest of the movie. So this complete, inane, stupid decision affects the plot for the rest of the movie. And then later on, he does another stupid thing. He handcuffs himself to Sarah so she can't get away. But this is after he knows that the crawlers are the main threat. It's just absolutely dumb. His companion, the rookie cop, the young woman, she's a little bit better. She's just a little bit boring. And I'm about to go into spoilers for the end of this movie. So, 3, 2, 1. This young rookie, she's the only character who makes it out, even though she's one of the newer characters. And I don't get what happens here. So she runs through the woods, and you think that's the ending. And then she looks around, and she can see in all directions quite far. And then she gets on a phone, and then suddenly the old guy from earlier in the movie who didn't go down into the caves, he suddenly pops out from behind a tree, knocks her out with a shovel, takes her back to the hole that she's just escaped from, half dead, and then just leaves her there. What? I don't know what's going on with the end of this. I barely remembered this old guy from earlier on in the movie. I have no idea what he's up to here. This is clearly an attempt at some kind of surprise ending just to give you one final scare, but I don't really get what the intention of this was. Now, there's no part 3 to The Descent, so it's just kind of left like this. It's a little bit of a Man in Black type thing from Halloween 5, except in that instance we got a part 6, so we got an explanation. Here, there's nothing to follow this, so we're just left with this really bizarre mystery of what on earth is this guy up to. I don't even have a theory. By all means, leave yours in the comments below. I have no idea what this guy is up to or why he does this. It's just very, very strange. So we've reached the point where I'll show you the version of the film that I've got. Here is my DVD copy of The Descent 2. I'm sort of loath to get rid of this. I mean, it's watchable, but it's a pale imitation of the first movie and highly unnecessary. It is a good disc in terms of features. It's got a director's and actor commentary. I can't be bothered listening to that. I hope that Shoana McDonald and Natalie Mendoza are not on that track. It would just be painful listening to them try and make out like this was a really good film and they were proud to come back for it. I hope that's not what is on this track. I hope it's just the other actors. If they want to talk this film up as being an important step in their career, you know, a chance to get a good horror gig, fine. But it's not likely I'll ever listen to that track. There's some deleted scenes with optional commentary. I might actually watch these deleted scenes before I put the disc away, just in case there's anything to do with that old dude that was taken out. The making of The Descent Part 2, without putting it on, I've got no idea whether that's like a little 5-minute featurette or an extensive half-an-hour thing. Impossible to tell. Storyboards, production design gallery, and a theatrical trailer. Pretty good set of features, to be fair. It's just a shame that the movie is a very, very poor follow-up to an absolute classic. So on that score, let's get to the bag of terror and see what I'm going to give this. I'm going to give it 2 bloody axes out of 5. That is a huge drop off from the 5 out of 5 that the first movie got. If this had been an original film, I might have gone to 2.5, maybe even 3. But the story is so patronising that I just have to knock it down a bit more. I don't like this film, but there's enough good action and scares and bits and pieces in the middle to justify getting the 2 at least. But yeah, it's definitely a disappointment. Right, I'll leave it there for today. I'll be back very soon to begin the Wrong Turn franchise. I'm really looking forward to that. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.